Welcome to Cardano for Everyone, a podcast series from Pasta Steak Pool. Each episode explores something new about Cardano in a way that's simple and accessible for everyone. In the mood for some Cardano magic? Let's get started.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, the world of cryptocurrencies.
All right.
We're going to start specifically with Bitcoin. You know, the OG crypto that kind of kicked this whole thing off, and get ready for some aha moments because we're breaking down how it works and, more importantly, why it even matters to you.
Yeah, it is fascinating to see just how money has evolved over time. I mean, just think about it. We went from bartering to coins to paper money, and now we're talking about these digital currencies.
It's amazing. Our sources define cryptocurrency as basically digital money that uses cryptography for security. That sounds really complicated to me. Can you break that down like in simple terms?
Sure. So the key difference between cryptocurrency and, like the dollars you have in your wallet is that crypto isn't controlled by any government or any central bank. It exists on what we call decentralized networks.
Okay.
Meaning it's powered by this network of computers all over the world.
So there's not one single entity that's kind of pulling the strings on the whole thing?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. If that's true, that is a massive shift. But our sources also mention that this idea of digital money isn't actually brand new. Apparently, there were some attempts even before Bitcoin, like something called eCash back in 1990. What happened to that?
You're right. eCash is considered the very first attempt at a cryptocurrency. But it didn't really gain any traction. I mean, one of the biggest challenges it faced was what we call the double spending problem. Imagine you could spend the same digital dollar twice.
Oh.
Yeah, it would just create chaos in the entire system. And back then, digital currencies just couldn't solve that issue.
Got it. So that brings us to Bitcoin. Okay, so our sources talk about this pivotal moment in 2008. You know, we have the global financial system melting down. This mysterious figure, or maybe it was a group of people, using the name Satoshi Nakamoto, releases the Bitcoin white paper. It all feels so cloak and dagger.
It really is. I mean, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding Satoshi Nakamoto and their true identity. But I think what we really need to focus on is the white paper itself. Full title is Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it lays out this whole vision for a system that basically cuts out those traditional financial middlemen that we're used to.
Like banks.
Yeah, no banks need.
Got it. And then on January 3rd, 2009, Bitcoin was officially born.
Right.
The Genesis block, which is the very first block of the Bitcoin blockchain, was mined, and those first 50 Bitcoins came into existence.
Yes.
What I find really interesting is that there's actually a hidden message that's embedded in that code of the Genesis block, and it references a newspaper headline about bank bailouts. It's almost like a little wink from Satoshi.
Yeah, it really highlights the motivation behind creating Bitcoin in the first place, building a financial system that's decentralized and transparent and ultimately free from the control of, those big institutions.
Okay, I'm starting to get it, but I have to be honest with you. I'm still a little fuzzy on how it all works. This thing called blockchain, and honestly, it sounds a little complicated.
It's kind of like if you're familiar with Google Docs, it's like a shared Google Doc, but way, way more secure. So every Bitcoin transaction is recorded in what we call a block. And these blocks are linked together chronologically, forming a chain, hence the name blockchain.
Okay, so it's like a permanent record of every single Bitcoin transaction that's ever been made.
You got it.
And because it's spread across all these different computers, nobody can tamper with it.
That makes the history of transactions both tamper-proof and transparent. And what's really mind-blowing is that this blockchain technology that we're talking about, it can be used for way more than just money.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking about revolutionizing things like supply chains, healthcare voting systems, anything where trust and transparency are crucial.
Wow, now that's thinking big. But let's just bring it back down to earth for a second. How does all this blockchain stuff actually affect me?
Good question. So the blockchain essentially eliminates the need for those intermediaries like banks, which can make transactions faster, cheaper, and more secure.
Okay.
I mean, imagine sending money without those hefty fees.
Right.
Or, waiting days for it to clear.
Yeah, I can see the appeal in that. So Bitcoin wasn't just about creating this new currency. It was really about establishing a whole new way of doing transactions and really building trust in this digital world. Break down some core concepts that Bitcoin introduced. They call them first-generation cryptocurrency concepts. Can you kind of walk us through those?
Absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin really brought a lot of groundbreaking ideas to the table, and these have really become the foundation of the crypto world as we know it.
Okay.
And one of the most important ones is decentralization. As we've already discussed, Bitcoin operates on this peer-to-peer network, meaning no single authority controls it. So this is a radical departure from traditional financial systems.
That's like the Internet of Money.
You could think of it like that.
That's pretty cool. What else is on that list?
So next up is transparency.
Okay.
All Bitcoin transactions are recorded on this public blockchain so anybody can verify them and see the balances. So this level of openness is basically unheard of in traditional finance. Then we have immutability, meaning once a transaction is recorded on the blockchain, it's set in stone, it can't be changed or deleted.
It's a permanent record.
That's right.
I'm starting to see why people are so excited about this. But what about security? Is it really as safe as everyone claims it is?
So Bitcoin relies on some very sophisticated cryptographic techniques to secure transactions and to control the creation of new Bitcoins. So it's designed to be extremely resistant to fraud and counterfeiting.
That's good to hear. And I've also heard that there's a limited supply of Bitcoin.
There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence.
Wow.
So this built-in scarcity is one of the things that makes Bitcoin attractive to some investors.
Interesting. So what other first-generation concepts should we be aware of?
Two other key concepts are pseudonymity and proof of work.
Okay.
So while Bitcoin transactions are public, the identities of the people involved are not directly linked to their Bitcoin addresses.
Oh, okay.
So this offers, a certain degree of privacy.
Got it. So it's not completely anonymous, but there's a layer of privacy there.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what about this proof of work thing? That one sounds a little complicated.
It is a very ingenious concept, though. So Bitcoin uses a consensus mechanism called proof of work, where miners use their computing power to solve complex mathematical problems. So by solving these problems, they actually validate transactions and add new blocks to the blockchain.
So it's kind of like a giant digital puzzle competition.
And the first miner to solve the puzzle gets to add the next block, and they're rewarded with newly created Bitcoins.
So these miners are essentially the backbone of this entire network.
Precisely.
Wow. It's all starting to make sense now. Finally, we have the concept of digital ownership, which means that users have full control over their Bitcoins through something called private keys. So this allows them to send and receive Bitcoins directly without relying on any third party.
You got it.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. But I think I'm starting to understand why this whole system of, decentralization and transparency is so appealing. It's like opening the door to a whole new world of possibilities.
We've really only just dipped our toes into the water here.
It is pretty amazing to think about how Bitcoin went from just an idea in a white paper to this global phenomenon.
It is.
So I'm really excited to kind of trace its journey, the highs and the lows, the whole wild ride.
It has been an eventful ride. The incredible growth and frankly, the volatility that Bitcoin has experienced.
Volatility might be an understatement. When I first remember hearing about Bitcoin, it was mainly just those tech enthusiasts and those really early adopters, talking about the potential of this decentralized currency.
Right, but then it just burst into the mainstream. All of a sudden, everybody was talking about Bitcoin, and its price just skyrocketed to these, unbelievable levels. Bitcoin is still a developing technology, and its future is still uncertain.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Bitcoin itself is still really subject to, market trends and speculation, and of course, regulation.
Speaking of other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin's success really led to this surge in what we call altcoins.
Altcoins.
Yeah, alternative cryptocurrencies.
I'd love to know more about that.
So basically, Bitcoin's emergence kind of opened the floodgates. And since its arrival, we've seen thousands of these alternative cryptocurrencies pop up, each of them with its own unique characteristics and objectives.
Okay.
Some of them, aim to address some of Bitcoin's limitations that we've talked about, while others are focused on very specific use cases or, industries.
While Bitcoin and, this underlying blockchain technology has a lot of potential, let's be real. What are some of the downsides? What are the critics saying?
That's a crucial question to consider.
Yeah.
No technology is without its challenges. Bitcoin is no exception. And one of the most, significant concerns is scalability. The Bitcoin network can only process a limited number of transactions per second, which can lead to delays and increased fees, especially when the network is really busy.
So if more and more people start using Bitcoin, the system could get overloaded.
Potentially. Developers are working on solutions, but it's definitely a hurdle to overcome.
Got it.
Another major criticism is the energy consumption. Remember that proof of work concept that we were talking about?
Yeah, the puzzle competition for the miners.
All that computing power that's required to solve those puzzles consumes a considerable amount of energy. So there are some, valid environmental concerns about the carbon footprint that's associated with Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what about the governments? They must have something to say about all this new technology.
Oh, they do. Regulatory uncertainty is another big challenge facing Bitcoin right now.
Okay.
I mean, governments worldwide are still trying to figure out how to approach, Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies.
Right.
So this lack of clear guidelines can make it really difficult for, businesses and individuals to navigate the crypto landscape.
Are there any other potential downsides that we should be aware of?
Well, Bitcoin's price volatility can be a double-edged sword. Well, on the one hand, it creates opportunities for speculation and potential for profits. But on the other hand, it makes Bitcoin a risky investment and a less stable medium of exchange compared to those traditional currencies.
So that whole dream of replacing the dollar with Bitcoin might be further off than some people think.
Yeah, it's definitely a debate that's ongoing. And we also can't overlook the security risks. Blockchain itself is very secure. Users need to be incredibly careful about protecting their private keys, because if those keys are lost or stolen, the associated Bitcoins are just gone. There's no central authority to help recover them.
So it really does put a lot of responsibility on the individual user.
It does, but that kind of comes with the territory when you're dealing with this decentralized system.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening so far. We've explored, the origins of Bitcoin, the rise of all these altcoins, the potential benefits, and, the potential pitfalls. And I'm starting to understand why this whole topic generates so much, debate and discussion. So what's next on the agenda for our deep dive?
Where does Bitcoin fit into the future of finance? What are the long-term implications of all this? And we've seen how Bitcoin has really shaken up, those traditional financial systems, and it started this whole global conversation about, what is the future of money?
And that's what I'm really curious about now. Where does Bitcoin fit into, the evolution of finance? And what are the long-term implications of this whole thing?
Honestly, nobody has all the answers yet. Some of these fundamental assumptions that we have about, how money works and who has control over it. And it's not just about replacing, traditional currencies, blockchain technology, the foundation of Bitcoin. It has the potential to transform industries that go way beyond finance.
We've touched on this before, but I'm really curious to hear more about these real-world applications. What are some concrete examples of how blockchain is being used right now?
Well, let's take supply chain management. I mean, imagine if you could track a product's journey, especially for things like verifying where our food comes from or ensuring ethical sourcing.
And then there's healthcare, where your medical records are securely stored on a blockchain. This could really streamline healthcare processes, enhance privacy, and reduce the risk of fraud.
These are amazing examples. It seems like blockchain could really be the key to, unlocking this more secure and efficient future. What about voting systems? I've heard some buzz about that, about, making elections more secure and transparent.
That's an area with immense potential. Blockchain-based voting systems could really help prevent voter fraud, ensure accurate vote counting, and ultimately increase public trust
in those democratic processes.
It sounds like we're just scratching the surface of what this technology can do. Let's kind of bring it back to Bitcoin for a second. Do you think Bitcoin actually has the potential to become a mainstream currency someday? Or is it always going to be, more of a speculative asset?
That is a very complex question, and there are good arguments on both sides.
Okay.
I mean, Bitcoin's limited supply and its decentralized nature makes it appealing to some as a store of value similar to gold.
But at the same time, those same characteristics also contribute to that price volatility that we talked about, making it, less practical for those everyday transactions.
Yeah. And then you can't forget about the evolving regulatory landscape. Governments are still grappling with how to regulate Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies.
So it seems like Bitcoin's future is still very much unwritten. Regardless of what happens to Bitcoin itself, it's clear that the innovation it sparked is here to stay.
Bitcoin has really ignited this technological revolution that's reshaping how we think about money and trust and, all of our interactions in the digital world. It's a conversation we can't ignore.
Yeah, it's going to continue to shape the future in ways we can only imagine. This has been a real journey of discovery. And honestly, I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
If you think about it, what we're really witnessing is this fundamental shift in how we interact with technology and with each other. These concepts of decentralization and transparency and digital ownership, they have really far-reaching implications.
One thing's for sure, we're living in a time of unprecedented technological advancement. So who knows what amazing breakthroughs are just around the corner?
Bitcoin may not be the ultimate solution, but it has definitely started a conversation that we can't ignore.
That's a powerful thought to leave our listeners with. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And I hope you found it as thought-provoking as we have. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep an open mind. The future of finance, and maybe even the future of our digital world, is being written as we speak. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for being part of Cardano for Everyone. We hope you gained something valuable from today's episode. If you'd like to support our mission of making Cardano knowledge accessible for all, consider selecting Pasta from the pool list when you delegate. Every bit of support helps us bring more content to listeners like you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next episode.